bit about the new silica dust standards that have been requirements that have been proposed by OSHA. With us to discuss this is Pat O'Brien, who is the Executive Director of the Concrete Sawing and Drilling Association, and Jim Rogers, who's the Director of the Western OSHA Education Center. So I'm going to let Jim go through a little bit and talk about what the standards are, and then Pat can discuss what the industry is thinking about this and where we're going to go with this.
Great, thank you, Bill. What I thought I would do is just spend about 2 minutes going through what silica is, what our exposure is to silica in the concrete industry, and just kind of get everybody up on the same page there. Because I hear a lot of talk throughout the industry about whether or not this is important, and is this something we've been exposed to for years anyway? Why do we need this new standard all of a sudden? And so I thought it was important to just kind of get everybody on the same page as far as that goes. First, it's important to understand the difference between silica and respirable silica. So silica is, for all intents and purposes, sand without getting into too much chemistry. And you can find silica on any beach in the United States, and in fact, it's one of the most prevalent elements in the world next to water. The difference between just standard silica and respirable silica is that respirable silica is particles about 100 times smaller than what you would find in the particles on a beach. And respirable silica causes, among other things, chronic silicosis. It causes COPD, it causes liver failure, and a number of other things that we've known about for many, many years. The issue with the chronic silicosis is it's really uniquely an occupational disease. I don't know of any other documented cases of people getting chronic silicosis through anything other than occupational exposure. And in our industry, in the concrete industry, where we're exposed to it is when we cut, grind, drill, break into concrete, and we basically make concrete dust. It's got respirable silica in it. From a health standpoint, and I'm a concrete guy, I'm a safety guy, I'm not necessarily a health expert, but if you look at the health data, from a health standpoint and a medical standpoint, that part of the industry tends to be in pretty good agreement that exposure to silica causes these diseases. There's not a whole lot of evidence out there disputing that. There's some studies that have been done about 10 years ago that show that the level of exposure that somebody gets, say, grinding concrete or cutting into concrete or drilling concrete, and there's lots of data out there for people to look at as far as that goes. But what the data shows, just to sum it up, is that when we do some of these operations in the concrete industry, if we don't take precautions, we are exposing people to limits above what we know causes these diseases. And again, that's been known for many years. OSHA sees this new standard really as playing catch-up. They really feel like they're revising their standard to meet what NIOSH and the CDC and some of these other organizations have published as permissible limits many years ago, and they're now updating their standards. Real quick, there are two standards. There's a general industry standard and there's a construction industry standard. They're two very different standards in terms of the construction industry standard has what I call a prescriptive-based table, and we can talk about that a little bit after maybe we get Pat's view on the standard and what it does. But the standard is in the rulemaking process now. It's a proposed standard. It's not been published. It's open for public comments, and that's why I think it's important as an industry to talk about these things now and get our comments, make our comments known and heard, and get any information to OSHA now during the rulemaking process before they publish the standard without our input.
Okay, so Pat, I know that you have been working with a group of industry people to try to come up with a cohesive industry response to this. So tell us about that.
Sure, Bill. The CSDA has been working with a group called the Construction Industry Safety Coalition, and what we are trying to do is to get all the different construction industries out there in the industry to work together to provide a united response from the construction industry to OSHA with regard to this proposed standard that they've established. CSDA has had a relatively long history developing or working with OSHA. We do have an alliance with OSHA that we've had, and we have OSHA in our booth, so we have a long and working relationship with OSHA that has been excellent. We have some concerns about this standard from a couple of different aspects, and one is that the standard, as it's proposed, we think is tended more toward permanent job sites where you can go in and make measurements of what the silica level is, and then come back and decide, okay, what type of respiratory control is needed. For sawing and drilling contractors and polishing contractors, we're a little bit different because our guys can be on 5 different job sites in one day, and so to have somebody go around and take measurements, by the time we get the results back, that guy is gone, and so it really isn't very effective for the type of work that we do. So as an alternative, 10 years ago we started to develop a proposal, and basically what it is a chart, and so that if somebody's doing a particular type of operation like flat sawing, and they're doing that inside, okay, they need respiration, and if they're doing it outside, there's no need for respirators. And all this data is based on data that CSDA has collected. A lot of it is NIOSH data, and so what we thought is that it's a much more effective way to protect worker safety, which we all care about, is to be able to have the worker get on the job site and he's doing this, okay, he needs a filter, he doesn't need a filter, or whatever it is. And so that's really what we're trying. Now OSHA has proposed to reduce the level by half, and the question that we have about that is that when the first OSHA rule was implemented, there were about 1,700 deaths in the construction industry. And since that rule has been implemented and a lot of things that have been done by industry, that level is down to less than 100. And so the question that we would have, which we have not got an answer for, is, okay, if we've made such great progress to go from 1,700 level to under 100, and that was 3 or 4 years ago that last data was taken, why do we still want to cut the level in half? And so that's really a challenge. And so part of what we're doing with the coalition of associations is to work and to get that message to OSHA to see what we can do to try and do something that's reasonable, that works for the contractors in the field, because you could have the best standard and requirements, but if it's so complicated that people don't use it, then that really doesn't protect the workers at all and doesn't do any of us any good, whether it's the industry or OSHA. So.
Okay, so Jim, do you think that this industry response is appropriate, and how will that get incorporated into the standard, if so?
Yeah, I do think it's appropriate. I think that, I've met with a number of OSHA officials, including the acting director of the Standards Directorate, who has made it clear and specifically asked for input from the industry. So right now we're in the public comment phase. It closes fairly quickly. It closes, I believe, on the 27th of this month. But this is definitely the time to get any comments in and make our opinions known. Pat, you discussed a table you proposed, and I know that in the proposed standard they published what they called Table 1 in the construction industry standard. That I think is their attempt at doing exactly what you said, and I agree with you. I think that we need something like that in the construction industry. I'm not sure that the current Table 1 as it's published is 100% complete. There's operations that I see missing, but I think it's a good start. And I think I've got an example in here, but just kind of a simple one. If you're using a hand grinder, attach a vacuum unit that meets specific specifications, and if the worker's not exposed for more than 4 hours, you don't have to do anything. If it's between 4 and 8, they use a respirator. I think that's an appropriate way for the construction industry to handle a new specification like this or a new requirement like this. And so I do think that the coalition is a good thing. I think that we probably need to get information to OSHA quickly on what we think might be missing from the existing Table 1 or the proposed Table 1, and if there are things in there that we think are just not workable, we as an industry think are not workable. Because I really do think that that's the key. Any operations that we have in the concrete industry that generate silica dust, I think we need to make every attempt to get them in that Table 1 so that we're not having to do air monitoring and things like that are tough on job sites where things change from day to day.
Okay, I think that obviously we all want to protect our workers as much as we can, and so if we can get a standard that everybody agrees is reasonable, then we should be in good shape. So thank you very much, guys.